We've all heard the stories. Roman emperors supposedly lounging in marble baths with 1,000 slaves at their beck and call. Ottoman sultans with harems so big they could field their own soccer team. And of course, medieval lords treating concubines like Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all! But here's the spoiler. Most of that? Pure nonsense.
1,000 slaves? I can't even afford lunch.
Exaggerated gossip, later propaganda, and a whole lot of Hollywood spice. Reality was less glamorous, more awkward, and often way darker.
Pokemon cards? More like unpaid roommates.
Today, we're tearing into the myths of slavery and concubinage across Rome, Baghdad, Tenochtitlan, and yes, right here in the United States. Prepare yourself. The truth is equal parts ugly, hilarious, and horrifying. Basically, history as it really was. Let's start with the greatest myth, that ancient rulers were basically the Hugh Hefners of history, surrounded by hundreds of slave girls, feasting on grapes while deciding which concubine was next.
Glamorous, huh? Try doing laundry for 20 people.
My liege, I present my daughter for your consideration.
Sounds glamorous, right? Wrong. In reality, keeping even a handful of concubines was less like running a fantasy palace and more like running a very stressful daycare where everyone hated you.
Not again! More ledgers.
Romance? This is a lockdown.
Maintaining dozens of women required massive resources, housing, food,
Romance?
guards, gifts, and endless politics.
I cannot believe this! You always ruin everything!
You know what? I'm done.
Most so-called harems were highly restricted spaces, filled with hierarchy, jealousy, and tension. Think less sexy paradise, and more Game of Thrones, but with worse plumbing.
Give that back! No! It's mine.
And here's another reality check. The women weren't lounging around waiting to be chosen. They were often trapped, controlled, and used as bargaining chips. Many concubines were given as political gifts, daughters sent by noble families, or enslaved captives with no choice at all.
No time for women, sire. Someone might stab you in the bath again.
The idea of the king personally enjoying hundreds of them?
For women, sire.
Pure fantasy. He was probably too busy worrying about assassinations, rebellions, or whether his soup was poisoned. So when you imagine the luxury of concubines, remember, for the women, it was a cage. For the rulers, it was more headache than pleasure. And for us, it's a history lesson in how power dresses up exploitation as prestige.
Love?
No, sir. Just paperwork.
All right,
Love?
let's time travel through the world's favorite civilizations and peek behind their bedroom curtains. Spoiler, you're not going to like what we find.
Oh, these taxes!
Always taxes.
Just a few more scrolls, my love.
Honestly, how many more taxes can they possibly need?
First stop, Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, and apparently cradle of legalized sexual slavery. Concubines weren't exotic playthings. They were status symbols, used to produce heirs and reinforce the father's property line.
Romance?
Romance? We run a prison.
Think less romance and more ancient HR department for wombs.
The heart unbound by earthly chains.
Rome wasn't
finds
much better.
freedom in
Romans
love's
believed a
sweet
master had
refrains.
rights over enslaved bodies,
Where
and
freedom
concubinage
sings,
was perfectly legal.
where beauty
But again,
dwells.
this wasn't Hollywood orgies every
hearts
Tuesday.
find
The
solace.
average Roman elite was less Casanova and more overworked tax evader who occasionally abused his slaves. The women? Zero say in the matter. And remember, Rome loved its paperwork. Even concubinage could be registered like property insurance. Fast forward to the Abbasid Caliphate and the so-called Golden Age. The famous harems weren't wild love fests. They were highly controlled political machines, staffed by concubines who often came from slave markets.
A 1,000 wives? I can barely handle one mother-in-law.
Eunuchs ran security. Poetry was written about love and beauty, sure, but for most women, it was poetry about a cage. The Sultan's bedroom was basically Fort Knox with extra pillows. And then the Ottoman Empire perfected the harem myth. Topkapi Palace? Sounds exotic, right? In reality, it was closer to a gilded prison/boarding school. Concubines trained for years with strict ranks and brutal competition. The Sultan might only ever see a handful of them in his life. So much for the 1,000 wives fantasy. More like 2 wives, 1 ulcer, and a dozen lawsuits.
So many concubines, so many gifts, so many punishments.
Your Highness, the census reports are in, and the concubine roster requires immediate review for the upcoming festivities.
Another concubine, already?
Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, concubinage was common for nobles and kings. Charlemagne, for instance, openly kept multiple concubines. But again, these were less mistresses by choice, and more women folded into dynastic politics. Picture Game of Thrones, but without the dragons to make it interesting. Just cold castles, arranged marriages, and bored women waiting for their lord to come back from war. Or die in it. So across Mesopotamia, Rome, Baghdad, Istanbul, and Paris, one thing's clear. The myth of endless passion was just that, a myth. For rule. So, before Columbus showed up waving smallpox like a party invitation, what was happening in the Americas? Here's the plot twist. Slavery wasn't invented by Europeans. The Aztecs, Maya, Inca, and many others already had complex systems of forced labor, human tribute, and yes, sexual exploitation.
Congrats! You're free after 20 years of debt slavery.
But don't picture giant harems with Moctezuma running a bachelor reality show. The truth is darker and weirder. Among the Aztecs, slavery could be temporary. You could literally sell yourself into slavery to pay off debts. Sounds like a bad student loan plan, right? And slave girls weren't living in silk tents. They were grinding maize until their fingers bled, or being lined up as ritual sacrifices. In the Inca Empire, there wasn't really chattel slavery the way we imagine it. Instead, there was the mita, forced labor for the state.
We're basically alliance treaties in skirts.
Imagine being drafted to build roads, mine silver, or haul rocks up mountains while some Inca official yelled motivational slogans. Concubinage? Sure, the Inca emperor had dozens of wives and concubines, but this wasn't sexy palace drama. It was politics.
You got this, team.
Who you slept with could literally reshape alliances between clans. And among many indigenous tribes of North America, captives of war were often enslaved. Sometimes they were adopted into the tribe, sometimes they were tortured to death, and sometimes they were used as status symbols. Because nothing screams, "I'm important," like owning another human being. So, before Europeans arrived with plantations, America already had its own messy, brutal, and very human systems of slavery.
Behold, my new lawn ornament.
The difference? It wasn't about industrial agriculture or global trade yet. It was about survival, honor, and power. In other words, the myths about wild orgies of slave girls and endless harems, that's fantasy. The reality was much less glamorous. Bone-breaking labor, ritual sacrifice, and a whole lot of political marriages. Sorry, Hollywood. So here's where history goes from brutal but local to corporate evil on steroids. When Europeans crash into the Americas, they bring new toys, guns, germs, and greed. Slavery in the Americas stops being about tribute, politics, or ritual. Now it's a full-on business model.
I hereby own everyone.
The Spanish launched the encomienda system, basically a rebranded feudal scam where conquistadors protect indigenous people in exchange for squeezing their labor until they die in mines. Think of it as the world's deadliest pyramid scheme, except with actual pyramids collapsing on you. Then comes the big twist: Africa. Millions of men, women, and children ripped from their homes, crammed into ships like cargo, and shipped across the Atlantic.
Don't worry, they'll adjust.
Forget harems of hundreds of slave girls. The plantation system didn't care about harems. It cared about sugar, cotton, and profit margins. Sexual exploitation was rampant, yes, but it was not luxurious palaces of pleasure. It was violence, coercion, and trauma on an industrial scale.
Not harems.
Just horror.
And yet, European elites spun myths about the exotic other. They fetishized harems in the Ottoman Empire, orientalized concubinage, and projected fantasies of wild orgies onto cultures they barely understood. While in reality, plantation owners were raping enslaved women in wooden shacks.
Remember, misery equals profit.
Meanwhile, in the United States, slavery morphed into something uniquely horrifying: racialized chattel slavery. You weren't enslaved because you lost a war or owed a debt. You were enslaved because of your skin, forever. And your children? Also enslaved. Generational trauma as a family business model. So, if you're picturing shiny harems and silken slave girls, erase that. The Atlantic system was not Game of Thrones. It was Amazon Prime, if Prime specialized in human misery, whipped backs, and endless unpaid subscriptions. History's greatest scam made global. So here's the part where history and Netflix go on an awkward date.
It feels so much warmer here.
Yes, the sun always finds its way. Did you hear about the new decree?
I'm not sure. Tell me more.
It's all just whispers, really. If this is paradise, I want a refund.
The myths we've inherited about slaves and concubines are often more fantasy than fact. Take Hollywood. Movies show harems as glittering palaces filled with belly dancers and silken pillows. Reality? Harems were political prisons. Dozens of women competing for power, survival, and the occasional chance to influence a king. Less sexy paradise, more Game of Thrones but with fewer dragons and way more passive-aggressive gossip.
Sir.
Or take the American South.
2,000 lovers?
Sure, Yan.
Pop culture loves to flirt with the image of the Southern belle, while quietly ignoring that those belles were surrounded by enslaved black women who had zero choice when the master came knocking.
I heard Caligula has. At least 500 girlfriends.
The myth of the benevolent master or the happy slave was propaganda, cooked up to justify horror. And the idea of slave girls by the hundreds? That's pure exaggeration. Roman emperors weren't literally sleeping with thousands. Ottoman sultans weren't running orgies every night. The numbers were inflated by gossip, propaganda, and a human tendency to imagine rulers as sex-obsessed maniacs. Reality? Most elites barely managed a few wives, some concubines, and a mountain of family drama. But here's the kicker. These myths didn't die. They morphed. Orientalist fantasies about harems shaped European art, novels, and even modern porn. Plantation myths still echo in how America remembers, or rather forgets, its slavery past. We joke about kings with harems, but rarely about enslaved women in Mississippi shacks. And today, the exploitation of vulnerable women still exists. Trafficking, coercion, abuse, just dressed in new costumes.
So, basically, 19th century clickbait?
Catch 'em all? Yeah, no.
The myths of harems and concubines still distract us, making past slavery look exotic or sexy instead of brutal and real. So next time you see a harem scene in a movie or a meme about ancient kings with hundreds of women, remember, behind the myth was sweat, blood, coercion, and survival. Darker, uglier, and far less Instagrammable.
History's highlight reel. Not as fun as advertised.
So, after all this chaos, from Roman orgy gossip to Aztec sacrifices, Ottoman harems and American plantations,
Action!
what did we actually learn?
Myths sugarcoat horror.
Action! Myths sugarcoat horror.
Shh, be quiet. I am so scared.
Now with 50% less human dignity.
First, the myths are more comfortable than the truth. It's easy to picture sultans with hundreds of women lounging in silk, or southern plantations as sweeping love stories. It's harder to picture the sweat, blood, fear, and abuse that were the daily reality. Myths sugarcoat horror, and we eat it up because it makes history look exotic instead of monstrous.
Power always dresses cruelty as normal.
I believe the new tariffs will greatly benefit our trade.
Indeed, the market has been quite favorable this quarter.
Second, exploitation doesn't vanish, it evolves. Ancient concubines? Plantation slavery? Today we call it trafficking, coercion, and abuse. Same script, different costumes. History's darkest practices have a nasty habit of rebranding. And third, power always finds a way to dress up cruelty as normal.
I have 400 concubines. Translation: I have 400 political problems.
Whether it's emperors bragging about their thousands of lovers, conquistadors claiming to protect indigenous laborers, or Hollywood serving harem fan fiction, it's the same trick, making injustice look like culture, tradition, or entertainment. So why does it matter? Because myths keep us blind. They make oppression look sexy or even funny instead of real. And the second we forget that truth, we risk letting new versions creep back in. The next time you hear someone joke about kings with harems or the good old days of empire, just remember, there was nothing glamorous about being owned, coerced, or treated like property. Behind every myth of silk and luxury was a story of pain, survival, and very human endurance. In short, history isn't a porno or a fairy tale. It's a warning label, and we'd better start reading it. History loves to lie, and we love to believe it. because the truth is way uglier and harder to laugh at. But laughing at it, that's how we face it.
Congratulations, you can't unsee the truth now.
Wow, didn't know that.
This was dark but hilarious.
Myth plus destroyed.
If you learned something, or if I just ruined every harem scene you'll ever see in a movie again, you're welcome. Drop a comment below. Which myth shocked you the most? The Roman gossip? The Aztec debt slavery? Or the fact that Southern planters were basically running the world's creepiest HR department? And of course, subscribe Alternate Realities for more dives into history's strangest, darkest, and occasionally dumbest corners. Because trust me, there's always more where this came from.